So I'm sure most of y'all have heard a parent, grandparent, or other older person in your life say that music is so bad nowadays compared to back in their day. I disagree, but I think that a lot of the music we listen to nowadays, including the song I just walked out to, leaves something to be desired. But why? If we just want to listen to good music and artists just want to share their creativity with the world, why have both sides become increasingly dissatisfied? Through my research, I attempted to solve this problem. And what I found out is that there are serious obstacles that must be overcome if we don't want to sound like our parents and grandparents talking about back in their day. But the good news is that by becoming more aware of the way you interact with music, you can be part of the solution. See, the music industry is overly bureaucratized. What I mean by that is that merely existing in the music industry is a complicated process. At the core of the recording bureaucracy is the record label, the basic unit of organization that produces and distributes music for artists. Record labels have long forced artists to make undue changes and sacrifices to their work. In the early 70s, Marvin Gaye's label attempted to block the release of his iconic album, What's Going On. Gaye released What's Going On anyway, and it ended up becoming one of the most influential albums ever. What's Going On was early proof that the intent of record labels doesn't always line up with the true direction of the industry or what is best for music. Radio dominated the market of music discovery through the 20th century, but in order to get on the radio, artists not only needed to have connections, but their work also needed to fit the mold of what belonged on that station. Around the turn of the 21st century, though, it appeared this corrupt paradigm may be shifting. The digital era began with the launch of file-sharing site Napster in 1999. Napster received praise because for the first time, it put the power of curation and discovery in the listener's hands. There was one problem, though. Napster was highly illegal and was taken down in federal court less than 5 years later, leaving its users waiting for something that replicated the freedom that came from the site. That void was soon filled, though, in 2008, with a small Swedish tech startup better known to all of us as Spotify. It took a little while to catch on, but Spotify soon dominated the industry, bringing total revenues up with it. However, Spotify soon fell into the same issues as radio before it, but this time with playlists. Playlists generated by Spotify and the three major record labels make up over 91% of the top 1,000 playlists on Spotify, and the company routinely leverages its over 200 petabyte data set to influence what its users are listening to. That's more than 1.5 million times the amount of data your phone can store used just to fuel playlist generation. Spotify CEO Daniel Ek even touted to investors that proprietary playlists, quote, put Spotify in control of the demand curve. The playlist situation is just a microcosm of the overarching issue in the music industry, which is that the middlemen hold a disproportionate amount of power. The most notorious middlemen in the music industry are the major record labels. In 2022, the three major record labels, Sony, Warner, and UMG, controlled over 75% of the recording market. To illustrate the problem with this, imagine a small town in the middle of nowhere. Now imagine there's only one company in that town, and everyone in the town who wants to work is forced to work for that one company. Since the people of the town can't just get up and leave and work somewhere else, the company can exploit them to their will and pay them as little as they please. This is called a monopsony, and it's a good example for the relationship between major labels and artists. Artists feel they can't be successful without the labels, so the major labels take advantage of that. Artists repeatedly complain about unfair deals and exploitation, while the major labels bank on forcing them to play it safe and stay inside the box, which is exactly what they must do if they want to make it onto one of the top playlists on Spotify. Landing a song on today's top hits is expected to add up to $163,000 in revenue for an artist, and making it onto Viva Latino, the top Latin music playlist, is expected to add up to $425,000 in revenue. There's a huge monetary incentive to get on one of these playlists by any means possible, even if it means changing your work with that goal in mind. Spotify sees how artists are reliant on spreading their work through the playlist system, so of course they're trying to make money off their needs. They recently launched a feature called Discovery Mode, which essentially allows artists to take pay cuts in exchange for their music being promoted by the algorithm in hopes of larger returns in the future. This feature is marketed as self-promotion, but it really ends up coming off more like exploitation, hence why it's been attacked by multiple lawmakers for violating workers' rights. They think it's just going to become a race to the bottom to see which artists can take the least amount of money in hopes that their music will blow up and one day they can reap the benefits. So remember my example about the little town? I know some of you may have caught on that I said that major labels only control 75% of the market, and the company in the little town story controlled 100% of the labor market in that town. and you may have doubted that. Well, that 25% is one of the keys to reviving the music industry, but it comes with a caveat. The remaining portion of the market is controlled by independent record labels. Independent labels allow artists more creative freedom, rights to their own work, and closer relationships with their executives. That sounds like the exact opposite of what I described in the Little Town story. The problem is that independent record labels lack the capital to make a bigger dent in the industry. They usually can't offer artists large advances or signing bonuses, and they don't have close relationships with Spotify and other major players in the industry in the way that the major record labels do. When you hear about an artist, quote, getting signed and making it big, it's usually the result of a large signing bonus with a major label that leads into a bad contract, while independent record labels create an environment where artists can be friends with their managers and benefit wholly from their relationship with their label, unlike Taylor Swift stealing Scooter Braun's whole discography. Most of y'all heard about an independent record label just a few weeks ago, Ben Washer's Reach Records. Reach Records was one of the first record labels to specialize in Christian hip-hop, which made it hard for them to find a lane. The major labels in New York weren't interested in promoting Christian music, and the Christian labels in Nashville weren't interested in distributing rap music. Reach had to create its own lane by staying independent, and what resulted was huge success and massive growth of the Christian hip-hop subgenre. I got the chance to talk with Ben after he came to Episcopal, and he said that Reach, after blowing up and winning a few Grammys, was approached by one of the major labels in attempts of a buyout. He said they thought about it hard, but ultimately they refused the buyout because they felt that being bought out by a major label would force them to sacrifice some of the values of the label and change the work that was being released. So who here listened to J. Cole? Manny? All right. So some of y'all probably heard of J. Cole's label, Dreamville. Hip-hop has arguably been one of the most commercialized genre, and Dreamville has challenged the status quo because J. Cole is an artist himself who has a different perspective on how the industry should work compared to most typical major label executives. Dreamville doesn't rush releases, pressure its artists, or sell out to streaming services. If entities like Dreamville continue to have this level of success, it's only a matter of time before more follow, creating an industry that doesn't hinge on treating art like a product. Personally, I found that one of the best ways to discover new music is simply by looking at the roster of an independent record label that one of your favorite artists is signed to. If you look at the roster of any one of these record labels, you'll find amazing artists that you probably would never hear of otherwise. At a certain point, we also need to realize the value of word-of-mouth recommendations and grassroots musical movements that exist outside of commercial spheres. Just the other day, I was reading the website of one of my favorite bands, Flip Turn, who I actually saw in concert last night, and it said that they grew not as a result of a big label marketing push or being on Spotify editorial playlists, but by word-of-mouth recommendations from their fans and the massive success of their live show. This should give us all hope because it means that we, the listeners, still have input in what goes on in the industry. The internet has made independent artists and careers more feasible by giving them a platform to exist outside of commercial influences, while also giving music enthusiasts a platform to share their own tastes. However, the internet, specifically short-form content mediums like TikTok, have resulted in a new epidemic of commercialization. I think the worst offender of this is Jack Harlow with his songs like First Class and his latest hit Lovin' On Me, both of which are clearly made for TikTok. Are these songs catchy and easy to listen to? Yes. But are they living up to Jack Harlow's full potential? I don't think so. At this point, I don't think there's much we can do to stop this epidemic of commercialization. As long as the avenue of making commercially formulaic music is open, I think some artists will take it with the backing of major labels. However, not all hope is lost. If you too have become disillusioned with the current state of the mainstream recording industry, I advise you to simply look elsewhere. Listen to music that breaks those commercial barriers and support independent artists and labels. If we band together and challenge the status quo, it's only a matter of time before the industry does too.